This is Talk Radio.
Across the UK, online, on DAB+, and on the Talk Radio app. Evenings with Kevin O'Sullivan
On Talk Radio.
Well, all the world leaders, they've hopped it from COP26. They spent a lavish few days there, arriving in their private jets, flying out in their private jets. They were joined by the likes of Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates, Prince Charles, Prince William, Uncle Tom Cobley. They were all there. And the question really is, what did they achieve? Well, what they did achieve is a load of agreements that none of us voted for. Nobody voted for these agreements all over the world. So I think apart from being an epic display of ocean-going hypocrisy, in fact, COP26 was an affront to democracy. Let's have a quick listen to Boris droning on about the alleged achievements of this massive non-event in Glasgow.
On the way to the G20 in Rome, I said to some of you on the plane that if this was a football match, then the current score would be 5-1 down in the match between humanity and climate change. And I think what you could say today, after 2 days of talks with around 120 world leaders, is that we've pulled back a goal, or perhaps even two. And I think we're going to be able to take this thing to extra time, because there's no doubt that some progress has been made.
Let's go over to my first guest, founder of the Future Cities Project, Austin Williams. Good evening, Austin.
Hi, Kevin. How are you?
I'm very well. It was lovely to see Prince Charles and Bill Gates and Justin Trudeau and all those other world leaders enjoying their champagne and their lovely drinks at a reception after they've made a series of agreements that none of us voted for. And that's the aspect of this festival of hypocrisy that I want to dwell on. We've already established that the people of this country, and I think the people of the world, they look at all these leaders and these VIPs turning up on their private jets, going round in 20-car motorcades. President Biden brought 85 cars with him on, unbelievable display of gas-guzzling opulence. So we've established that hypocrisy was the middle name of this event, FLOP26 as they're calling it. But the thing that disturbs me, Austin, is that they all got together and they made all these agreements. They've made all these green agreements, which I think are pretty meaningless. I don't think they're going to achieve any of their targets. I don't think any of them will get to net carbon zero, be it 250, 260 or 270, whenever they say it's going to be. And I don't think they'll achieve their deforestation targets for 2030. That's not the point. The decisions they've made will profoundly affect the economies of the countries that they lead, particularly here in Britain. And my question to you is, who voted for this? Who voted for American rich guys, Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates, to fly in and influence these decisions? Who voted for Prince Charles and Prince William to go up there and influence these decisions? And who voted for any of these world leaders to go and make these unilateral agreements among themselves? The people have been left out of this. So I say, apart from it being a festival of ocean-going hypocrisy, it is also an affront to democracy.
Well, you won't find much of an argument with me there. I mean, I think that it's ironic that just after the European Union Brexit elections, where we get rid of an unelected superstate, if you like, we've now gone to a suprastate, where all the leaders of the world have come together to somehow protect their interests or protect their leadership potential in, as you say, an affront to the sovereign rights of independent nations, especially those in the developing world, but also as an affront to those people who maybe have put them there in the first place. And we didn't vote for this as part of our election mandate. So I think people Jeff Bezos is the one who's actually been capturing most of the headlines, having flown back from space to attend the conference, and having been in space, he realised how fragile the Earth was and all that kind of.
You couldn't make it up, could you? And he arrived, of course, on his $60 million private jet. It's just breathtaking, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's almost like he's taken the idea of Amazon to the logical extreme, because he actually wants to take over the Amazon. The way he's now propelled himself as defender of natural beauty in South America, as well as in intervening within Africa and what have you. This is colonialism in a philanthropist guise. So the whole thing is despicable. In some ways, there's two things he's argued for. One was that he wants to conserve the tropical Pacific Ocean, which makes President Macron look like a novice when it comes to determining who fishes in whose water. He's going to stop people in those regions from fishing to conserve the natural resources. So that's one thing. And the second thing, he's actually now trying to engage with the deforestation agenda, which in anybody's book is a critique of Bolsonaro in Brazil, right? An attack on Bolsonaro for good or ill. But the idea that lots of people are signing up, lots of countries are signing up to the deforestation, saying we will not cut down our trees, A, provided you give us some money, and B, and then we will not industrialize. So it's basically, don't chop down the trees and build a factory and have a developed economy. You can't do that. We are now, Bezos and the entire global crew, are going to stop you from actually having a standard of living to which we in the West have become accustomed. So the whole thing is utterly despicable in the guise of greenery. So you have any number of left-leaning liberals who are endorsing Jeff Bezos as some kind of humanitarian savior. That's, the whole thing is a joke.
Well, our Prime Minister, whose own contribution to the environment is to have 6 kids with another one on the way, and he also flew back from Glasgow to London last night, I think it was, on a private jet. Now, he's committed Britain to a green scheme, a green future that will cost way over £1 trillion. That's what he's been busy agreeing to. And apparently the agreement that the American President Joe Biden has made could cost America, to get to carbon net zero by 2050, could cost America $100 trillion, which will cost the average American about $11,000 a year for the next 30 years or whatever it is. So, what right do these people think they have to make these deals? Nobody voted for this. It's extraordinary, isn't it?
Well, the whole thing is ludicrous. In some ways, you've got the aftermath of COVID, which was their own intentional destruction of the economy, locking everybody down and destroying the economy. And now you've got a destroyed economy. Either you are going to create a new kind of agenda, which, as it happens, me and you are going to pay for, and the listeners, rather than it coming out of Biden's pocket isn't going to be emptied by this. And it's kind of a reconstitution of the way that they're going to now try to redevelop capitalism post-COVID. And that's, I think the whole thing is an agenda which is a recipe for disaster, but more so it's actually, as you say, not being discussed or debated or permitted to be discussed by anybody outside the high and the mighty. And that's the joke. And I think people now begin to see through it, you see. They've created, just like the Brexit referendum, they didn't necessarily have to have that Brexit referendum, but by announcing it and by making it a referendum and by talking about it, we became aware of it and we became much more alert to the notion of sovereignty and democracy. By them now flagging up COP26 and making this into a global conversation to which 99% of the population are excluded, suddenly we become a little bit more aware of this iniquity of which they represent. And I think that in some ways you could say that's the only good thing to come out of this, is that there will be a lot more criticism, a lot more discussion, and a lot more contempt shown for some of these leaders. Hopefully, it will not turn to conspiratorialism, but I think if it's in the right direction, it could be a really useful critique here.
Yes, I think it is an own goal. I think they've highlighted not only their own hypocrisy, but also their own aversion to proper democracy, to consulting with their various populations, not least Boris Johnson. And what I find interesting at the moment, Austin, is there are increasing calls for a referendum on getting to net carbon zero. Now, you can rest assured that Boris Johnson will close his ears to that because he'll be terrified of the result. What they do, these politicians, is they go around commissioning polls whereby pollsters go around asking people, saying, on balance, would you prefer the planet to be saved or destroyed? And so most people say, well, in fact, everybody says, well, on balance, I'd prefer it to be saved. And so Boris said, you see, It's a very popular policy. But now that it is dawning on us how much it's going to cost, now that it is dawning on us that these agreements are being made by people who'll be dead when we get to 2050 or 2060 or 2000, that they are basically empty, but they are expensive. Now that the realities of this commitment to get to carbon net zero are dawning on us, I think people, if they were given a referendum, would vote no to carbon net zero. And Boris, and for that matter, all the other world leaders would be terrified of that result because they've gone so far off on their own on this.
Yeah, but you can also bet your bottom dollar that if there was a referendum, then everybody would be saying you didn't know what you were voting for, because it's science and you're too stupid to understand the complexity of it. So, it's a foregone conclusion, whichever way it runs. And I think you're right that, there's definitely an avoidance of that conversation. There can only be an avoidance of the conversation because this is a top-down discussion. Again, just to add a few things on the resolutions that have come out of COP26 in terms of this new kind of global engagement. The funding in Africa will be there to shrink their agricultural footprint. If you understand what that means, they're going to shift to diets of plant-based sources. And they're going to reduce deforestation, as I say, in place of payments. So the whole thing, I mean, apart from the fact they've tried it here and we're a little bit cynical, but try it in Africa and they'll welcome it because they're desperate for any cash they can get. And the second thing is that the I don't know if you saw in the paper, but the Taliban were arguing for sustainability consultants to go to Afghanistan to help them out in their Green New Deal.
Don't tell me the Taliban are in on it too.
Yeah,
everyone.
Well, 240,000 people killed by the US misadventure in Afghanistan. If only they'd said they were doing it to protect the environment, it would have been okay.
Yes, I mean, what is going on here, Austin? I mean, this is like, Glasgow COP26 has sort of crystallized a kind of mass hysteria about this. The flames of which are being fanned by these world leaders, who I think have convinced themselves that they really are doing good. The truth is, I think I'm pretty safe in predicting no one will get to carbon net zero by 2050, will they?
Well, I mean, it's eminently feasible if it depends how you get there. You can stop all industry. You can invade foreign countries and plant lots of trees. There's a million ways of doing this.
But in the real world, it's a long shot, to say the least, isn't it?
Well, I mean, in the real world, obviously, what's happened in the last 50 years, between 2020 and 2070, imagine what's happened between 1970 and now. There's been the world has changed, hasn't it? And you kind of think that actually there will be new inventions if we allow it to develop, if we allow our human intellect to come up with ingenious solutions without the force of mandate dictating that we only think in one direction. Then you can have a 360-degree view of innovation. What we're having now is you can only invent things, you can only think about things, you can only discuss things if it's carbon neutral.
Yeah.
And that
it's retrograde, isn't it? It's retrograde.
Absolutely,
it's backward looking. That's what Prince William was on about the other day, castigating Bezos and Elon Musk for sending rockets into the sky. I do not castigate them. I look at that as technological advance, and if mankind does not pursue adventure, does not pursue technological advance, then it is lost. So you're right. I mean, we're going to look backwards and not get anywhere.
In the same way, I mean, as it happens, I probably don't castigate Boris for having many children. I mean, apart from the fact they're all going to be little Borises. But apart from that, you kind of more people on the planet, potentially, I always think, is a good thing. Humanity is the solution to whatever problems we want to suggest that we have. Yeah. And I think the more people that are potentially there able to confront it, the better. But obviously, we're living in a very iniquitous world, and therefore, it's many, many more poor people who are going to be born rather than people with opportunities.
Well, they should get themselves up to COP26. There's a lot of free food, a lot of free champagne going up there. Austin, always good to talk. Thank you so much for your time. Austin Williams there, founder of the Future Cities Project. When we come back, the care home crisis. 60,000 care home workers could lose their jobs next Thursday. I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and this is Talk Radio.